Welcome to the Damascus Road podcast. On the road to Damascus, Paul had a radical encounter with Jesus and his life was changed forever. That is what we hope and pray for here. Now, on to this week's episode.
Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but we're entering a new season. Not just meeting in person again, and it's actually not the fall yet. The fall doesn't actually begin until September 22nd. I don't know who decides those dates, but it's back to school season. My social media feeds have blown up with pictures of kids heading back to school, teachers moaning about heading back to school, parents and grandparents documenting the back to school journey, and of course, universities starting again as well. Kaylin Chinaki, who I had the pleasure of baptizing recently, has grown like crazy as documented in her recent back-to-school picture. There might be a small difference in perspective between these two shots, but that is serious growth in 1 year. My own boys started preschool this past week, and here's the requisite picture of their back-to-school journey. Whenever we enter a new season like this, it feels like anything can happen. The possibilities are endless. No matter what's come before, the season you're entering now can be a new start, a fresh start, a new beginning, and I want you to start this new season well. Who will you choose to be in this new season? Now, when I started college, which I won't mention how many years ago that was, my life too was ripe with possibilities. I was going to a new university in a new town where I knew no one and no one knew me. The world was my oyster as far as who I could choose to be, because a new season is a chance for a fresh start. Would I choose to be Sports Ryan? In high school, I played baseball and football. Maybe I could find my niche in college in sports. I went to a Division II school, so the standards weren't terribly high. But then I met a guy who played on the baseball team. And baseball, of course, the greatest of all sports, is the sport I would have pursued. And this guy said I should totally join the team, but the team was really bad, like historically bad. The coach was terrible. There were practices on Sunday mornings, so church was totally out. And I'd probably have to ride the bench for 2 to 3 years before even getting a chance to play in a game. So yeah, totally join the baseball team. I instead settled for a softball intramural championship. Not bad, but more of an intramural Ryan than sports Ryan. Or maybe I could do something that was like sports adjacent. Maybe ballroom Ryan. I met another guy who convinced me to give Ballroom Ryan a shot, or more specifically, West Coast Swing Ryan. Our school didn't have a full-blown ballroom club like U Arizona, but we had a swing club called Swingers. I'm not totally sure that they fully thought that name through, or maybe, it was college students, maybe it was entirely intentional, I don't know. But I swung my hardest on the dance floor for a few years, performed, taught, and danced. Abandoning the pretense of sport altogether, maybe I would choose show choir Ryan, or for younger people, more like Glee Club Ryan. I joined performing arts and done that in high school, so I was recruited not only to join Swingers, but also Franklin Street, the Broadway and pop music choir that not only sang, but danced too, and clearly had wonderful costuming. I learned how to apply my own makeup, to avoid tripping over my feet while maintaining my vocal volume, and even how to dip a girl. Not a bad option to try out. But maybe you want something a little edgier than show choir. What about rocker Ryan? I was in a band for a few years and grew my hair long. I had a soul patch, because that's cool. We toured some. We even played in an amphitheater once. With the right combination of vocals or musical chops, fashion, hair, and guts, you too could try this one out. Now, for a short period of time in Tucson, I tried Hunger Games Ryan. Epic looking, but hard to maintain. Now with my boys, Roland and Aiden, starting preschool, I've started giving them some options on who they could choose to be in their new season. Roland could be dinosaur-loving paleontologist Roland, or Aiden could be monster Aiden. I think Aiden's actually always monster Aiden. I encourage them to try out some of my classic college personas. Not sure they're entirely on board. Now, have you ever done anything like this? Tried to find your place, tried out different identities or different groups, trying to discover who you really are, make some friends, stave off loneliness, find some purpose? Maybe it was academics or business, maybe it's Greek life or the party scene, student government, service, maybe even church. At the beginning of a new season, we have a chance to do things a new way, to choose to be a different version of ourselves. And some of those versions may be superficial, like different clubs, different group of friends, pretending to care about British literature or the Marvel universe. But we also have the chance to choose deeper and more profound things. God calls us to constantly be transformed into the image of Christ. Could we not just choose a different version of ourselves, but choose a better version of ourselves in this season? A version that looks a little bit more like Jesus. How do we become people who look like the best versions of ourselves? Graceful, unhurried, peaceful, deeply joyful and centered. How do we become people who look like Jesus? Now, the Bible has a lot of wisdom for us in this area, from the life and words of Jesus to a whole section of the Jewish scriptures known as the wisdom books, and even the story of a guy known for having a sleepover with some lions. As we begin a new season together, let's see if we can glean a little wisdom on how to make intentional choices to become not just a different version of ourselves in this season, but the version of us that God created us to be. Now, I hope that you're excited for this new season that you're starting, whatever that looks like for you: new job, new town, new school, or just jazzed about fall and the tantalizing aroma of pumpkin spice lattes around the corner. But our friend Daniel, who we're going to look at first, was anything but excited about this new season in his life. Daniel had a new job, a new town, and a new school, but none of it was something that he wished or hoped for, but rather it was something that was forced upon him. Let's back up a second for some context. Daniel grew up in the country of Judah, and next to Judah, near to Judah, was the vast kingdom of Babylon. Babylon had a great and famous king whose name was Nebuchadnezzar. Now, unlike some conquering kings who enslaved people, Nebuchadnezzar was a pretty progressive guy. Instead of terrorizing people, he actually integrated the different conquered cultures into his kingdom, and not only won the trust and allegiance of these conquered kingdoms, but enhanced his own court and reputation as well. But it also subtly, culturally conquered and integrated nations into the Babylonian Empire. So while at first blush it may seem progressive, Nebuchadnezzar Babylonized people. They lost their identity and were absorbed into the kingdom of Babylon. Who they were was erased after a few generations. Sound familiar at all? Well, guess which country Babylon conquered next? That's right, it was Judah, the place where Daniel lived. Now, each time Nebuchadnezzar conquered a new people, he sought out the most talented and those of royal ancestry and brought them to Babylon to join his court. 4 of the best and brightest that he invited to his court were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Maybe you've heard of them. Daniel is famous for playing with lions, and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah for playing with fire. But if you're still struggling to make the connections, their names were changed. They couldn't keep their Jewish names in this new reality. They had to be assimilated into Babylon. Daniel's name meant the Lord, or the God of Israel, is my judge. And instead, his name was changed along with his friends. This is Daniel 1:7. The chief of staff renamed them with these Babylonian names. Daniel was called Belteshazzar. Hananiah was called Shadrach. Mishael was called Meshach. Azariah was called Abednego. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are probably the names that you know Daniel's friends and countrymen by. Interestingly, throughout the book, Daniel retains his name instead of his new one. Belteshazzar means, may Bel, one of Babylon's gods, protect him. So instead of a name that identified him with the history of Israel, the Lord is my judge, as one of God's chosen people that could help center him on who he is and who he's supposed to become, he was called by a different, identity-altering name. Now, for Israelites, names were significant, often reflecting what they valued and what they hoped for their children. Many people today may give their kids names that sound cool or interesting, but I'll tell you, baby naming websites are alive and well. For instance, Ryan, the name Ryan means little king. And as a firstborn, I may have lived into that a little bit. Aiden, my secondborn's name means fiery one, and he is certainly our firecracker. My firstborn, Roland's name means renowned or famous throughout the land. Time will tell on that one, I guess. Who knows? In college, I met a guy named Travis, which means to traverse or cross, and was actually named for toll collectors initially in the old ancient world. I discovered a few months later after meeting Travis that Travis wasn't even his actual name. He just decided to tell everyone that when he arrived his freshman year. I still have no idea what his real name is. Now for Daniel, the identity changing wasn't just about his name, Babylon had also taken valuable items of worship from the temple in Jerusalem and placed them in their own God's temple, making it clear that the Babylonian gods were superior to the Israel and Judah's gods, and the God of Judah and Israel had been conquered. Effectively, it's communicating there's no need to cling to the law or wisdom or guidance of a conquered God. Let it go. Become one of us. Now, Daniel didn't have a lot of options, but the Babylonians couldn't control his inner world, his thoughts, his worship, his relationship with God and his friends. In community, Daniel, as well as his friends, made an intentional choice about which version of themselves they were going to embrace. The Jewish version that upheld their identity as God's beloved, secure, and rooted, or the Babylonian version that abandoned this core identity and instead embraced the approval of others, fitting in and being liked in a new environment. And from the very beginning of their time in the season, in a new place, far from the support of family and friends at home, we see Daniel and his friends make very intentional choices to protect the version of themselves they wanted to be. All of the young men who were being trained in the Babylonian system were fed from the king's table. But this meant that Daniel and his friends would be eating food that the Israelites didn't eat. The Israelites were set apart from the people around them by their diet for their health and their uniqueness. So Daniel had a decision to make. What diet would help him stay connected to God? How could something as mundane as food help him order what he didn't have control over? How could that help him craft the right sort of life? Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to them by the king. He asked the chief of staff for permission not to eat these unacceptable foods. So Daniel takes a risk and chooses to be different than those around him. Instead of embracing the Babylonian version of himself, he chooses his identity as God's beloved and lives that out in a small way through simply eating differently. Now, this choice might not seem like a big deal. What does it matter if Daniel has some bacon wrapped scallops or drinks the king's wine? It tastes delicious. And it's not that bacon or wine are wrong or sinful. Instead, it's the accumulation of small choices that form us into different versions of ourselves. And the small choices over time matter. What does it matter if you don't do that discussion post for class? Is that wrong or a sin? No, not really. But that small choice can lead to a succession of missing assignments until before long, the end of the semester is here and you have to ace all your exams to keep up that passing grade. What does it matter if you sleep in and skip church on a Sunday? Not much. I mean, church isn't in the 10 Commandments, but that small decision can lead to a habit of skipping until you turn around and realize that you haven't been to church in 2 months and you're feeling disconnected from God and to community. What does it matter if you just play on your phone or listen to a podcast instead of talking to your roommate or your coworker during lunch or your spouse at night? Not much once, but that small choice can lead to a succession of disengagement until before long you find that you haven't developed any friendships. You are lonely and disconnected, and your heart aches to be known. The accumulation of small choices form us into different versions of ourselves. So what small choices are you making over time that will help you become who you're made to be? Let's see what happens with Daniel's small choice to eat differently. At the end of 10 days, Daniel and his 3 friends looked healthier and better nourished than the young men who had been eating the food assigned by the king. So after that, the attendant fed them only vegetables instead of the food and wine provided for the others. Our small choices add up over time, and Daniel's intentional small choices, in line with who he wanted to be, resulted in a healthier and better nourished version of himself in the future. Are our small choices in line with who we want to be, with the version of ourselves that is healthier and better nourished for the future? While this decision doesn't seem super spiritual, Daniel sets his course early in life. He is going to follow God. He's going to stay connected, even in the small things, even in a difficult environment that he only has limited control. And his life flourished both at that time and in the future. Daniel and his friends took control of what they ate for 10 days, and after those 10 days, they were healthier and better nourished than those in the king's diet. and they continued to make small choices in line with the healthy and better nourished version of themselves, the self deeply connected to God and others. And they stood out among all the young men in the court, eventually holding significant positions in the empire. Daniel himself served multiple kings, and not only the Babylonian Empire, but the empire that succeeded them as well. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego decided early on that they would pursue a life worth living, a life marked with wisdom and courage, a life marked by the fear of the Lord, a life of character. Perhaps you too would like a healthier, better nourished version of yourself. The version of yourself that looks more like Jesus and the person he created you to be. But how can we make wise choices in the small things like Daniel and his friends? One of the reasons they were able to live so well in their challenging season was the great history of wisdom literature from Israel. From King Solomon, known as the wisest man of the ancient world, sprung a fountain of wisdom literature that we know today as Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. Now, the goal of these books was to help the people of God learn how to live well in the world God created. Proverbs specifically contrasts two ways of living in the world, the way of wisdom and the way of foolishness. While nearly every culture has proverbs or short, catchy, wise sayings passed down in memorable packaging, the Hebrew scriptures make a unique claim. This wisdom is more than just the accumulated experience passed down through the generations. It's divine wisdom, or human wisdom, which reveals God's wisdom. At the end of the first chapter of Proverbs, long before the actual proverbial sayings start in chapter 10, we're told that those who ignore wisdom or the understanding of how the world is designed, the cause and effect that's written into the warp and the weft of the universe, those who ignore wisdom that is available for any of us to learn are fools. For the waywardness of the simple will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. But whoever listens to me will live in safety and be at ease, without fear of harm. Now this is spoken in first person by Lady Wisdom in Proverbs, who personifies this attribute of wisdom, the attribute of God in Proverbs. And as we craft our lives, we can choose to live wisely or foolishly. And God wants us to live wisely. Author Andy Crouch tells us, wisdom is not just knowledge, mastering information about particular aspects of the world. Wisdom is understanding. It's the kind of understanding specifically that guides our action. It's knowing in a tremendously complex world what the right thing to do is, what will be most honoring of our Creator and our fellow creatures. This is why in the Psalms and Proverbs of the Hebrew Bible, the fool is the one who doesn't know God, doesn't understand fellow human beings, and doesn't even really know himself. Proverbs 18:2, a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing personal opinion, which also sounds a lot like social media. A fool can know a lot of things, but a fool doesn't really know what it is to be a person. And the fool certainly doesn't know how to act in a way that will serve the flourishing of persons, even in the end his own flourishing. The fool may be well educated, but the fool does not understand. When he acts, the results are sooner or later hilarious and disastrous in equal measure. Daniel and his friends knew they had real choices in how to live before them in their new season in Babylon, and they wanted to live wisely, because wise living generally led to flourishing, becoming the best version of yourself and honoring God. The Proverbs aren't promises, they're more like probabilities. Generally, when you live and make decisions in line with the way God's well-ordered world is designed, life goes well for you. Goodness and justice are objective realities that we ignore at our own peril. And when we live with wisdom, we are working with the grain of the universe. When we are foolish, we work against the grain, and it will catch up with us sooner rather than later. Now, chapter 10 through 31 of Proverbs are sayings and wise guidance that give good, specific advice, addressing everything from managing money to sex. If I design my life in a way that reflects wisdom, the chances are good that I'll live a good life. Now, naturally, we all know life is more complex than this, and there are exceptions to every rule. So taken in isolation or as absolute promises, the Proverbs can get us into trouble. But the Proverbs don't stand on their own in wisdom literature. They're part of a group of books. For instance, perhaps you've heard this famous proverb regarding raising children before. Start children off in the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. Now, this proverb is really good advice. Parents have an enormous impact on their children. They steward an incredible gift and are invited to help their children learn how to live well in the world, which is a lot like what Proverbs is trying to do and how it tried to help Daniel and his friends as well. One of the greatest challenges I have as a father is to love my kids well enough to help them develop character, to learn to live wisely and courageously in the world with God's help. In fact, Proverbs begins with a father giving his son advice and ends with a son relaying the advice he received from his mother. But even the best parent doesn't make all the decisions for the children. Children still have to live their own lives. And we all know people with terrible parents who turned out pretty great, and vice versa. This proverb is good advice, but it's not universally true. There are exceptions. And the two other wisdom books, Ecclesiastes and Job, address these exceptions and the complications of living in a challenging world. Daniel is in a really horrible situation, in exile in Babylon, but even there, even in hard times, he can live with wisdom and courage. And so can we. But it takes more than just knowledge of how to live wisely. Wisdom isn't complete without two other guiding principles. While wisdom can be found and is revealed to everyone to a degree, wisdom isn't some impersonal force, but it's an attribute of God. Proverbs 8 tells us that wisdom was what God used to create the world, to knit the fabric of all creation and how it works together, creatively and cohesively. Whenever anyone makes good, beautiful, and just decisions, they tap into wisdom. And when we make bad decisions, we work against the way the world is made, and we are foolish. Anyone can learn to live wisely and craft for themselves and others a beautiful life. In fact, the same Hebrew word that's translated as wisdom is also used to describe a master craftsman who skillfully creates their art. Just as they craft their pieces with wisdom, we can craft our lives with wisdom as well. Proverbs tells us that our journey to a well-crafted life begins with the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Now, fear here isn't scary fear or terror, but rather a recognition that God is God and we are not. We don't get to define reality. We live in the reality that God has created. In reverence and awe, we can delight in God's great world of love and learn how to live well, how to craft a life that leads to flourishing for us and for others. And the best way to do that is to humble ourselves and recognize that our view is limited, and I don't get to make up my own definitions of what is right or wrong or how the world works. We can discover the truth, but we don't define it. We live in it. For Daniel and his friends, they had great wisdom and fear of the Lord. These two areas guided their lives and gave them a chance to live well in God's well-ordered world, even in a time of great challenge and difficulty in exile in Babylon. But crafting a good life is incomplete without putting wisdom into action. In the Hebrew language, you can't simply know how to live wisely. You actually need the courage to act wisely. You display that you have true wisdom when you actually put it to use in your life. Daniel had the wisdom and courage to preserve his identity in his diet. He was honoring God and refusing to lose his identity as one of God's people in the small area where he had control. And in that small area, he was going to honor God by eating a vegetarian diet and drinking water, which ensured he would avoid non-kosher meats, as well as avoid being enticed by the wealth of the Babylonian Empire. He was willing to be different, even in the face of opposition. And that took more than knowing what to do. He had to actually do it. In life, we will have many choices where we can act with courage or with cowardice. Will we live wisely in this life, or will we simply go with the flow of culture, of American culture, of our work culture, of our schools culture? Will we blend in and look like everyone else? Out of fear or laziness or passivity, will we choose the world's plan of flourishing? Will we choose performance or pleasure or significance or self-affirmation or life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness after our own way? So let me ask you, as we start a new season, how is the life you're leading going for you? How is the way that you've chosen to follow working? Is the path you are following leading to your flourishing? Are you increasing in joy and contentment, in peace and kindness? Are you feeling loved and giving that love to others? I'll get more specific even. Is your technology that is designed to make your life easier and better, is it serving you well in leading to flourishing? Or is it possible that there are some ways that your technology promotes isolation instead of connection, entertainment instead of participation, and stagnation instead of growth? It's not inherently bad and can be incredibly good, but without intention and boundaries, we choose the ease of distraction or virtual distant relationships over social media or text instead of the challenge, and it is a challenge, the challenge of real people and actually talking to someone or getting to know someone that you don't know yet. The increase in depression in younger generations correlates perfectly with the release of iPhone and the rise of social media. Is the way of life you are following actually producing anxiety, fear, disappointment, fleeting joy or happiness, depression, loneliness? Because it doesn't have to be like that. We can learn how to live a different way from the wisdom of the Hebrew Scriptures and most directly from the life and words of Jesus. Jesus asks us, he asks you, are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn how to live freely and lightly. I don't know about you, but rest and recover sounds really great. Living freely and lightly sounds incredible. So many people are stressed, hurried, harried, lacking sleep or rest, always performing for their worth, and it's killing them. It's killing us. I'm a doer, I'm an achiever, I'm an earner, and I'm not great at rest. I find affirmation when I succeed and work hard. And it's easy to start believing that I'm worth something because of what I do, not who I am, or more importantly, who I am in Christ. But the way of the world, the treadmill of performance, will destroy us all. But Jesus says there's another way. It's found in following his way, living with wisdom and courage, in humility, following him and trusting him in how to truly live. Listen to the active terms in this verse. Come, get away, walk, work, watch, learn, keep company, live. Jesus is saying that there's a whole different way to do life, but we actually have to do something, not to earn our way, not to prove our worth, but to live in the way of Jesus. This is ultimately the path to a life of true life, a life of character that is marked with wisdom and courage. Jesus' Sermon on the Mount is one of his clearest teachings on what it looks like to live as one of his followers, as the people of God today. And I would encourage you that reading Matthew 5 through 7 is always a good choice to be reminded of something that you can build your life on. Maybe that's something you could do this week, is read Matthew 5 through 7 again. Jesus ends the Sermon on the Mount with this: therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. The challenge is, for many of us, we have trusted Jesus with our eternity, but we have not trusted him with how to live right now. We know that we need help, but we haven't accepted his invitation to learn how to live from him. Jesus never invited anyone to pray a prayer of salvation. He invited them to follow him, to learn how to live from him. Jesus is calling us to stop trusting everything and everyone else on how to live, and to start trusting him for our lives, and through him discover real life, both now and in eternity. And living a life worth living, following the way of Jesus, becoming who we are made to be, isn't a solo operation, it's a team activity. It happens in community. It's in relating to and caring and living with other people that we learn how to love someone who is different from us. where we learn to resolve conflict and keep friends as friends instead of our ex-friend or our ex-roommate or our ex-classmate or our ex-spouse. It's in community that we can be sharpened in our thinking, encouraged in how we live, where we can gain wisdom and have a safe place to live courageously, even in small ways, before we have to do it in bigger ones. Life can be incredibly hard, and living uniquely, following the way of Jesus, while better, isn't always easier. All of life is this incredible journey of character formation. From our families, where we are forced to live in close proximity to other human beings, and parents ideally do their best to help their kids learn right from wrong, to form depth of character so we can live independently. But it starts there. And then it continues. Because we're made for relationships, and our needs and longings and even our hormones push us together. And we keep bumping against each other, and when we bump against each other, we learn and we grow if we embrace the journey. God has perfectly created life to form us if we let it, especially if we do it in community with wisdom and courage. Andy Crouch again tells us, we need people who know us and the complexities and difficulties of our lives really well, so well that we can't hide the complexity and difficulty from them. We need people who love us, who are unreservedly and unconditionally committed to us, our flourishing and our growth, no matter what we do, and who are so committed to us that they won't let us stay the way we are. If you don't have people in your life who know you and love you in that radical way, it is very, very unlikely that you will develop either wisdom or courage. You may become smart, you might even become successful, but it is very unlikely you will have a deep enough understanding of yourself and your complex calling to actually become either wise or courageous. We are just too good at deceiving ourselves, and we think too highly of ourselves. The people who know us best see the truth about who we are, even as they also see more clearly who we could become. Many people have helped me grow and have challenged me when I needed to be challenged. My parents, mentors in college and ministry, my brother, my closest friends, my wife, and now my kids, who are these little reflectors of how I need to grow, either in how they show me myself through their behavior or how I act towards them. Without people who love and are deeply invested in me and I in them, I could easily slip into a life of seeking small temporary pleasures, of overperformance, or of simply apathy. And without God, the center of that change, empowering and motivating and inviting me to become who I'm made to be, I'd be completely lost. The one decision I don't regret when I started my season in college was finding a ministry to connect with. The first week I was in school, I met friends I still have today, and some of them are even in our church here. I decided that finding a community that shared my commitment to Jesus and a desire to follow his way was the most important pursuit, the most important Ryan I could be. And without that decision, I wouldn't be here today, and this church wouldn't exist. So as you craft your life in this new season, I encourage you, number one, choose community. In your family, with your roommates, the family you create, and especially at your church. We are made for relationships. We're made to love and be loved. And it's in community that we can choose wisdom and courage that will help us develop our character. Crouch again. The first family for everyone who wants wisdom and courage in the way of Jesus is the church. The community of disciples who are looking to Jesus to reshape their understanding and their character. And the church is and can be family for everyone in a way that biological families cannot. No matter whether your parents are still living or whether they were ever loving, no matter whether you have a spouse or children or siblings or cousins, you have a family in the church. And I believe that this is true. The church can be an incredible family for you. But no church is perfect or entirely lives up to this calling, any more than families do. But you can be a part of trying to do it well together. If you don't have a church family or are just exploring or trying to find the right one, I invite you to make your home here and get connected. Join a small group through Church Center, find a way to serve on Sundays or during the week, come to Sunday mornings and to the events this next month, all of which provide a context for real community to form. It may be hard and uncomfortable because you are just starting to get to know people here, or you may not even know anyone yet. But that will change if you give it time. All relationships need time and attention. If you give both to this community, you'll discover that you have great friends and a family that will help you through the toughest times and celebrate with you in the moments of great joy. I met my wife in this church. People I met as freshmen were in my wedding. People I didn't know 2 years ago are now dear friends. And we're on this journey together towards Jesus, learning to live wisely and courageously. And if it's not here, find a church family somewhere. Don't look for something so much that you never put down roots. Don't let every minor annoyance keep you from finding a community. We're not made to do life alone. We're made for life with Jesus and each other. Find your spiritual home. Secondly, I encourage you to choose small choices. Remember that the accumulation of small choices over time forms the next version of yourself. Daniel and his friends ate differently for 10 days. So I encourage you today to make a 10-day commitment. What small choices could help form a healthier, more nourished, more Christ-like version of you? Maybe you want to pursue wisdom in the next 10 days, so you read Proverbs or the Sermon on the Mount. Maybe you want to make prayer a vital part of your daily rhythm. For the next 10 days, spend time with God, talk to him about your day and dreams and concerns, and learn to rest in his love. Maybe you need to choose community. For the next 10 days, dive deep into Damascus Road. Come to events, get lunch or coffee with someone here. Come to a small group. Choose community. Maybe you need to act with courage and eat differently, or talk differently, or watch different media, or turn off the phone, or really be present to the people around you, or even maybe to accept Jesus' invitation to try his way for the first time. Try forgiveness. Try resolving conflict. Try loving your enemies. Try serving instead of being served. Try sacrificial love. Taste and see that the way of Jesus is good. Maybe better than you've ever imagined. So let's start to craft a new life, just a day at a time with these small choices. In just 10 days, there was a difference in Daniel's life. And there can be a difference in our lives as well, especially when we wisely and courageously choose character modeled after Jesus. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, we love you. We want to become the people that you've made us to be. We want to learn to be more and more like Jesus, and we confess that we don't always live wisely. Often we look a lot more like the fool in Proverbs than the wise person. May we choose to live well in your world, to choose wisdom and courage with an understanding that you are the source of all love and life. Help us. Thank you for your love for us, for adopting us into your family, for knowing that we are secure in our identity as sons and daughters, no matter what. And then invite us to grow. Help us to grow. I know that you're calling us into who you made us to be all the time. Help us to step into that invitation in the small moments of life that form who we become. Thank you for this day to worship together. It's in Jesus' holy and precious name I pray. Amen.
Thank you for joining the Damascus Road podcast. Our mission is to follow Jesus together by being with God, loving everyone, transforming people, developing leaders, growing new ministries, and changing the world. You can find out more about us online at DamascusRoadTucson.com.